You open the fridge, there's nothing there. So what's it gonna be? Greasy pizza? Sad drive-thru burgers? Dish by Blue Apron is for nights like that. These are the pre-made meals of your dreams. At least 20 grams of protein, no artificial flavors or colors, no chopping, no cleanup, no guilt. Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello and welcome to Haway the podcast. It's Martin here, back from my intensive 4-week pre-season training camp, and we are recording straight after Sunderland's pre-season game against Seville in the Algarve. The lads were in action in what was our first real test of pre-season after our warm-up game last week against South Shields. So joining me to have a good old chat about that game and some of the key talking points to emerge from it is Andrew Smithson. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks. Welcome back, Martin. Nice to have you back on the airwaves.
No, it's fun, isn't it? We had 4 weeks, best part of 4 weeks over in England, so that was nice. And you and I got to share a beer, didn't we?
Yeah, it was good fun. That was about a week or so ago now. And
it was last Saturday, so
that's it. Yes, the sun was shining, and that's the first time we've actually met face to face in real life. So yeah, that's brilliant.
Right. So yeah, me, Andrew, Chris, and Kelvin had a couple of beers. That was my intensive pre-season training. I'm quite match fit in terms of beer now. I wasn't before I started, but no, it was nice to have the chat. And obviously, most of the conversation revolved around Sunderland, which was good. And look, there's plenty to talk about out of this game. And I think it's our first real test of pre-season. Obviously, we played that traditional game against South Shields, but this was a real step up. And I think you can see in the fixture list how the club are really approaching pre-season. We've got some really tough tests coming up. And, the Seville Spanish side, La Liga, I know you and Gav talked about them yesterday in the lead-up to the game, Andrew. And even though they almost got relegated last season, they are a La Liga club. I think there's a new manager and new sporting director in place. And this was a big test for us, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I think they look pretty decent. Like you say, they were down the bottom last season in La Liga, but maybe it's a case of wanting to impress a new boss because they looked pretty sharp. I think they gave us a good game, to be fair.
And it was quite a physical game, wasn't it? Which I think Regis Lebris before the match talked about us needing to really put into action some of the things that we've been working on in training. Which it's kind of what managers say at this stage of pre-season, isn't it? But I don't think we had any opportunity not to, especially in the first half. It was a physical game. Seville were really at it. They were putting the foot in. It was a good test for us. I think it gave the players no room really to not get really switched on for a competitive game.
Well, yeah, and sometimes that can help, can't it? Like maybe an early 50-50 or somebody gets tripped up or what have you, and then suddenly everyone's, standing up straight and thinking, oh, we'll have a bit of this. We'll see if we can give as good as we can get. And you're right, it was competitive. To say the least. I think both teams were happy to get stuck in, and I mean in the second half there was a couple of flashpoints as well, so definitely this wasn't like a half-paced pre-season game. It was played quite competitively, I would say.
It was. And look, we'll get into the game, but before the game kicked off, there'd obviously been a bit of speculation about Romain Mundle. I think people had spotted he'd taken some things off Instagram, and there's rumours he'd left the camp. And obviously we had the news breaking that, is it Llorente? I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but the left winger from Italy who's played under Lebris was on the verge of a move, and apparently he was in the crowd tonight for the game.
But didn't know that.
Yeah, Ronaldo was also in the crowd too, so they're around the squad. But apparently the move for this left winger is on the verge of completion. And people had kind of put 2 and 2 together with Mundle's social media activity and him leaving the squad. But news emerged just before kick-off that Mundle has had an operation. He's had surgery on injury, so that's potentially why that move has been hurried along, because we were linked with this lad earlier in the season, but nothing had transpired. So to see us kind of put our foot down on that deal suggested something was going on. And on Instagram just before the game on Saturday, Mundell had put, "Devastated to be here writing this message, and words can't fully describe the emotions attached to this setback. Sometimes it's hard to find the positives in situations like these, but without a doubt, I'll be back better physically. Surgery was a success, and the road to recovery begins now. Although it's been a difficult period for me over the last few days, this is only a minor setback, and I will be back better than before. Lastly, I want to thank Rowena Johnson, Ernest Schilders, my teammates and staff for their unwavering support and dedication." So Mundell's had surgery, and I've had a look at who Rowena Johnson and Ernest Schilders are. And this Schilders is a specialist in hip and groin surgery. Mm-hmm. So, again, doing an amateur detective work, and we know the problems that Mundell's had with his groin and hamstring over the past season. It seems that there could have been a recurrence of those problems that plagued him throughout last season. So that's a big blow, I think. I really like Mundell as a player, and I was looking forward to seeing him in action, which hopefully we still will, but it might be a few weeks or a couple of months before we do see him.
Yeah, it's a real shame. And from what you've just read out there, Martin, it doesn't seem as if he's given a time scale, I don't think. So no. That's unfortunate. I did wonder why you were wearing a deer stalker. Obviously, that's why you've been looking to unearth who those two names were. But it's a shame for him, because like you, I was keen to see what he could do in the Premier League. I wish players would just avoid social media, because the second they do anything, they change a profile picture or anything like that, and people, quite understandably, but people try and read a lot into it. And yeah, a couple of days ago, everybody was putting two and two together and thinking, oh, well, he's away. But like you say, now it might be the case that Loriente is being brought in because we knew this had happened with Mundell. I think he played last week at Shields and looked pretty sharp.
He did. He scored. He scored.
Yes. Yeah. It is a real blow for the lad, and you can tell by the way he's talking in that message there that he's disappointed by it, because he's had problems before, and he doesn't seem to ever get like a stretch of clean health. And yeah, it's unlucky for him, and yeah, that's not nice to see for him. I hope he does have a speedy recovery.
Yes, let's hope so. And obviously he joins the likes of Dennis Cirkin, Luke O'Nien, Adji Elise, Leo Hielda on the sidelines, and all of those players look, well, I think they've all been ruled out of the early knock-ins of the season, haven't they? So, with that in mind, I think the lineup for the first half tonight was pretty much as strong as we could go, really, with the exception of Simon Moore in goal, who was given the 90 minutes. So we lined up with Simon Moore in goal, Trey Hume at right back, Dan Ballard and Jenson Seelt at centre backs. Niall Huggins made another step in his recovery from injury, playing at left back. In midfield, we had Enzo Lefebvre, we had Noah Sadiki, and we had Habib Diarra playing centrally. And that was a really interesting setup, which I want to sort of go into with you, Andrew, because I think that's going to be key to how we actually set up this season. On the left wing, Adringa played. I'm probably not getting these names right. So a lot of new names for us to get across. On the right wing, Talibi, the Belgian winger, played, and up front, Eliza Mayenda started. And I think that was a really interesting selection. I do think that's probably as strong as we could go. And midfield's going to be the interesting thing at present, isn't it? Because we had those three new signings. Obviously, Lefebvre spent a few months with us on loan at the end of last season. But three new lads playing centrally, and obviously Dan Niall sat out the first half. How did you kind of think about that sort of setup in midfield, Andrew, and also the starting 11 in general? Do you think that's was he sending a message in terms of that's the strongest 11, or was that just giving players games in a reasonably strong setup?
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe 7 or 8 of that starting lineup is are involved against West Ham. Yeah, there's a couple of positions where we expect to maybe sign more players, but certainly that middle three at present, I think that's what we're going to be going with for the time being. I mean, Niall came on in the second half and he was given the captain's armband, so I don't think that's it for him. But yeah, the way the first half went, the players that were named for that opening 45 minutes, I think that was Labris wanting to have a proper good look at whether this would be a good way to go into the West Ham match.
I think it would have been, it probably caused more trouble than it was worth by not giving Dan Neil the captain's armband in the second half, wouldn't it? I think I would kick off another whole trail of social media speculation activity. But, we've got the issue with Dan Neil's contract, and the reality is that the club aren't going to lose out on a significant transfer fee coming in if he's not going to sign the contract. So, that's a big one to watch, I think, during the course of pre-season, because I think that will play out one way or the other, probably sooner or later. Two players I wanted to talk about, Andrew, as we sort of get into the action. Jenson, Seelt and Niall Huggins both, again, missed, the vast majority, all of last season in Huggins' case and Seelt's case as well for most part. They're coming back, they're both fit, and I thought both of them showed up really well tonight.
They did, yeah. They looked pretty sound defensively. In Huggins' case, he got up the pitch quite a lot as well. Although, to be fair, I think Seelt had one moment where he brought the ball out of defence and was kind of weaving through the middle of the pitch. I think he might have got chopped down in the end. But yeah, you're right. They missed huge chunks last season, so they'll be. They might, have something in the back of their mind that I don't want a recurrence. I don't want any more problems. But they both look committed. They both looked to be in good nick, and yeah, I agree with yourself there. They both did themselves justice. They both gave good performances for me.
I've never been completely convinced by Seelt. I don't think we've seen enough of him really to make a judgment on him. But I've always liked Huggins. I think Huggins is a really, really good player. And, he can cover both full-back positions as well, which is great for us as a squad. So hopefully if he can keep himself fit, I actually think there's a good player there who can step up to the Premier League.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he does have the ability to do it. And you mentioned earlier that there's 4 or 5 names out, at least for the first couple of weeks of the season, including Dennis Serkin. So Huggins will be looking at it and thinking, if I, keep going, get my head down, I've got half a chance of being brought back in. And he was very unlucky not to have had an assist. I think it was before, don't know what time it was, maybe about 20, 25 minutes. He crossed the ball in for Mayenda, and Mayenda wasn't able to put it on target. Yeah. But Huggins, his part of that move was excellent. So yeah, they'll both fancy they'll both think that this is their time to try and catch the eye. And in Huggins's case, I think he is in with a shout of playing in the first team this year.
He is, and as you say, he had that opportunity to set up Mayenda midway through the first half, but before that we kind of done our normal thing, which is kind of typical of how we play, where we try to sort of start do we deliberately start the game slowly, or do we see how the opposition's lining up? I think we kind of see how the opposition's lining up before we really spring into action. And it took us maybe 4 or 5 minutes to get going, but after we did do that, I thought we were really impressive. We played a lot of good football in midfield. To say the 3 in midfield got hold of the game, and I thought we looked pretty good against a decent side.
Oh yeah, I mean at half time I was looking up the odds for us to win the Premier League. Nothing like keeping my feet on the ground. I did think, that sounds like I'm taking the mick, but no, I did think we looked good, Martin. You're right. The first couple of minutes, Mo had a couple of bits and pieces to do. I seem to remember somebody at the back post being free and being able to get a shot on goal.
Yeah.
But after that, we looked good. We were very very quick on the break. We were looking to play the ball forward as soon as we can. You know, it was very rare that you could say we looked ponderous. It wasn't like we were just knocking the ball around at the back. We seemed to have a bit of purpose about our play. And we seemed able to cover a lot of ground. You know, we are 1 minute we are shielding and trying to defend, and then suddenly we were nicking possession. And in the blink of an eye, we were kind of in their final third. There was, I take the point that the first few minutes were a little bit sluggish, but after that, there was a lot of positives to be had, I felt, in the first half an hour to 45 minutes.
So the centre and midfield, I think it's going to be crucial for us this season. Obviously, we had, as I mentioned before, we had the 3 new players playing in there. And when you looked at it sometimes, Sadiki was the deepest one. Diarra was kind of playing to the right of him, and Lefebvre was playing in that role that Bellingham played a lot for us last season. Then other times, Diarra was the furthest back, Sadiki was pushing up, other times Lefebvre was dropping back. So we seem to be rotating quite a lot with those 3 in centre midfield, which kind of does give me the impression that at present, the coach and staff are kind of thinking they might be the 3 to start the season because they were working the partnerships in there. And I thought they really got to grips with the game quickly and provided a platform for us to play.
They did, and I tell you what, not meaning to be mean about the lad, until you mentioned him there, I'd kind of almost forgot that Job wasn't there. Yeah. You know, I thought Job was fantastic for us last season, and this isn't a criticism of him. It's almost to say that the players that have been brought in did such a good job that we could afford for him to have moved on. And like I say, for me to not even click that he wasn't on the pitch. But you're right; those 3 did kind of switch roles, and that's a good thing if you've got that flexibility. I mean, there was a couple of times when Lefebvre seemed to be actually pushing further on, and was 1 or 2 times when he was even up alongside Mayenda. So this is how football gets played now, I think. You don't just stick rigidly to your position. You are expected to move and alternate depending on how the game's going. And for those 3 to play like that after just a couple of weeks in pre-season, you know, they've not really built up a proper deep relationship. Those early signs are pretty promising, I would say.
No, they are. And as you say, like when we were out of possession, Lefebvre would push up, and we did it last season, didn't we? Where it's almost a 4-4-2 out of possession. At the start of last season, Job was the one pushing up alongside the striker. Then latterly, Rig was doing that role. So it kind of shows that we're keeping the same sort of system and formation in the main potentially for this season. One thing I did notice, which was a change from last season, was when we were in possession, and this again kind of makes me think that we saw the structure of the first 11 in that first half. When we were in possession, Trey Hume was pushing into the centre midfield to create an overload. Now, we didn't see that much, if at all, last season, but he did used to do that when Mowbray was manager. And I thought that was an interesting development in terms of how we set up, and we were just trying to create that overload in midfield to spring an extra body in there. So that was an interesting thing to watch. It'll be good to keep an eye on that as pre-season progresses. As you say, Simon Moore had an early save to make, but after that, we really got into control. We had a couple of shots from outside the box. Sadiki had an effort. Trey Hume had a shot after a nice bit of play. And then we had the first of what was a few iffy refereeing decisions. The first one was Eliza Mayenda was put through on the right-hand side of the box, and I think he got fouled. I would have thought that was a foul, but he's given offside. And I think this is one of those games when, if we sort of fast forward to the end, we obviously drew with Sevilla thanks to a last-minute equaliser for them. But with VAR, we could have got a couple of penalties. We could have had a goal disallowed. We could have had another few where we were through and we were given offside, which looked a bit dubious. So, this was the first of a couple of penalty shouts in the first half, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the referee was over the moon that he's seen his liner put the flag up there, because, I was calling for a penalty, but that means absolutely nothing, because I call for a penalty if, a Sunderland player falls down within 20 metres of the box. So, yeah, it looked to me as if it could have been given as a penalty. You could have got away with it. So, yeah, for the linesman to stick his flag up, and he wasn't offside.
No.
He that bit you can be confident in saying. I think the linesman's given the referee a bit of a get out of jail card there, and just meant he's not had to make a decision.
No, I think the referee was pretty happy that the flag went up, and that saved him any sort of bother. We had another one shortly after when Mayenda seemed to be tugged back in the box. There was a clear shirt pull on him there as well. And as you alluded to before, Niall Huggins set up Mayenda. There was a lovely pass from Lefay to put Huggins clear down the left in the build-up to that. And I think we saw more of what we can kind of expect from Enzo Lefay. Obviously, last season we stuck him out on the left-hand side for the majority of the time, out of necessity rather than by design. But getting him centrally, getting him on the ball, he just oozes quality, doesn't he? And look, he's working his way up to fitness, as all the players are. But I think that even that little ball, the awareness to flick the ball through to Huggins, set him free, it's promising, right, isn't it? It's a great. I'm so enthusiastic about him and looking forward to seeing him play in the Premier League.
Well, yeah, it looked such a simple thing to do, and yet he's done it absolutely perfectly. And yeah, I think you're right. We were kind of forced into pushing him out wide last year, and he did some amazing things on the wing. But when he's in the centre, he's got even more room to play with. He just sees things that you don't expect players to see. He makes things look effortless, and yeah, that little kind of, if I'm not getting the moments mixed up, he kind of prodded it through.
Well, it was a long ball from either Moore or the centre half, and Lefay was facing infield, and he sort of hooked it behind him.
Oh, right,
didn't he?
Right,
yes. Through.
Yes.
Which again, the awareness to know where Huggins was, because it wasn't exactly a educated build-up. It was a long ball that the centre half missed, but again, to have the awareness to pick up Huggins' run, play it through to him, was just outstanding. And then shortly after that, we obviously scored. Enzo Lefay got on the score sheet, and obviously thanks very much to the Seville right back for threading probably the best through ball of the night to Enzo, but he showed great composure to finish it off, didn't he?
He did, yeah. I think the keeper was unsure if he should come racing off his line or just stay back a little, and he kind of got caught in two minds. But yeah, Lefay could have very easily mucked that up. Interesting to me as well that was another big punt upfield. We mixed things up. We were attacking. We were getting the ball down the wing. Mayenda was dropping deep again. Mayenda, I thought at times looked as good as ever. He was brilliant at turning and then running at the ball. So we had all of this intricate type of stuff going on. But also there, you've just seen, like you say, just a big kick up field, and we've been able to capitalise on it and get a goal. So that also bodes well that we have a couple of different strategies open to us that we can capitalise on. And yeah, it was a tidy little finish. And hopefully we're going to see more and more from him in the next few months.
No, I think, again, if you can kind of get him centrally and get him on the ball, he's got the quality to shine, I think. But that was pretty much it for the first half. I think we saw a trademark Trey Hume tackle towards the end of the first half, which I think got given as a foul, but he got the ball. It was a bit like where he left off against Berrett and Diaz in the playoff final, wasn't it? But looking at the first half, because this was a distinct game of two halves, as the old cliche goes, wasn't it? Looking at the first half, was there anything else or anybody else who really stood out to you? Anything else that you were really impressed by or really took your attention?
Yeah, I think the structure was quite clear. The players seemed to know what was expected of them. There was a couple of times because of the angle of the camera, you could see there was like very clear lines within the team.
Yeah.
In terms of individuals, I quite liked the look of Adingra. He had a couple of nice little flicks, and a couple of times he tried to get round his man. I think he might have had a shot from the edge of the box. So he looked pretty busy. I think he'll be somebody we enjoy watching. And yeah, Adingra, like you say, pretty much all the new lads did well there. They'll be really pleased to have got a good performance in, and they'll just be wanting to build on it from here, I would have thought.
I think it's going to be interesting as well, isn't it? Because you see, Adingra really stood out. But we've got Loriente apparently coming in, playing same position. So whether one of them goes out on the right or one of them goes through the middle or what have you. But, it's good to have options. It's good to have quality options to mix and match. And obviously, hopefully, Mundell comes back sooner rather than later into the first team action. But half time, we made 10 changes. All of the outfield players changed. So we had Simon Moore starting in goal. I think Jenson Jones was a right back and Harrison Jones at left back. We had Zach Johnson and Tom Lavery playing in centre back, central defence. Patrick Roberts came in on the right. Dan Niall in the centre midfield. Who else played centrally? Alan Brown came on.
Brown alongside Niall.
Centre mid. Milan Alexic played on the left, and then we had Abdullahi and Isidore pretty much playing as a two up front, although Isidore kind of drifted out wide a bit, and Patrick Roberts drifted infield a bit to mix it up. And I thought this second half performance, and look, you can kind of see from that 10 in outfield where we probably need to strengthen. I think, you got some good options with Isidore and Roberts and people like that coming on. I thought Abdullahi looked bright and has an awful lot of potential. But the back four, even allowing for the injuries we've got, you kind of look at the back four and go, we need a couple of extra bodies in there, don't you? But I think as a unit, they did pretty well.
Yeah, and that back four was quite inexperienced, so they did as well as could be expected. I watch a lot of under-21s, and unless I'm just having a bit of a blank, I don't remember Harrison Jones playing at left back often.
No, I don't think he... No. It's a new one on me.
So yeah, not only have you got lads at the back who are quite young and inexperienced, you're also asking a player to maybe try and learn a new role. They were decent enough, I thought. I think you mentioned earlier it was a game of two halves, and I think what you saw was two different styles that we might get next season. In the first half, we were a bit more aggressive, looking to do things, looking to be on the front foot. And that is perhaps how we'll go in certain games, particularly at home. Whereas in the second half, we soaked up a lot more pressure. The ball was in our half a lot longer. And it was, when we broke away, it was more isolated attacks. And that might be how we have to play. I don't know, if you're away to one of the Champions League teams or one of the better sides, we might have to be a bit more solid at the back. And that back four that we played might not necessarily play in the Premier League, but certainly that would be the way I would expect us to go in some matches.
And it was quite reminiscent of even the playoff games, wasn't it, where we were pretty pragmatic, solid, looked to catch them on the break. As I say, there probably was a huge element of that in terms of not only putting a different outfield 10 on, but trying a different way of playing, a different system. Look, they had a lot of the ball. I think Simon Moore made a very good double save sort of midway through the second half, but they didn't really trouble us that much. I think we coped with them well, but they had a lot of possession.
They did, and you're right. That double save was pretty sharp from him, particularly the second one, because I know it was quite central, but it was fired in pretty quickly. A lot of their opportunities, in my mind, if I've remembered them rightly, kind of were from outside the box.
Yeah,
long distance type of efforts, and And really, if you're a defender, you probably look at that and think, oh, well, if that's all they've got in their armoury, that suggests we're doing all right. We arguably created the better, clear-cut chances in the second half. So it just goes to show that you don't have to have the ball all the time to have a threat.
That's right.
You know, so it was a different game in the second half. But again, some positive things to take from it, and maybe a sign of where we can expect new arrivals to what type of position our new arrivals are going to fulfill, because we were having to play a couple of the under-21s in defence.
A few of the players that stood out to me, Patrick Roberts, I thought looked really sharp and lively and got on the ball, and he looked to have a lot of quality on the ball, which we know he does have. Milan Alexic is somebody who I'm really pleased to actually see in that first team group, and he's got some football in both games so far. And I thought he looked lively out on the left. And Abdullahi, I just, again, you're making instant judgments. We've seen not a great deal of him. Obviously, he arrived last summer, but struggled a lot with injury. But there's a couple of reserve games, under 21 games I saw last season where he stood out. But I just think he's got something. I think he's got pace, he's got sharpness, he's got strength. Should have had a goal, if not two. Yeah. But I just think he looks as if he's got something to offer.
Yeah, you're right. We don't know how this will translate to kind of competitive first-team football, but what we've seen so far is he looks like he's going to be an absolute handful to deal with. We seemed to bring on a couple of younger players in the second half. I think Sevilla looked as if the players they brought on, and then they brought some more on later on in the half, they looked to have more experience in that second half.
Yeah.
And yet, Abdullahi, or however you pronounce his name, apologies if you're listening, Ahmed, I think I've butchered your name there, mate.
We've both done a fairly good job on a number of names.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's late at night. Well, it is for me. It's
early in the morning for me.
Aye.
It's all relevant.
So, yeah, we're both bleary-eyed, but at the other end of the scale. But I hope I haven't offended him, because he looked like a big physical presence, and he didn't appreciate getting wound up. It looked to me as if he was up against a couple of senior defenders there, and he's tortured them. He stood up to them physically. There was that spat he had in the box. He was more than happy to go toe-to-toe. And like you say, in addition to that, he wasn't just a battler. He's had a couple of chances there and could very easily wrap the game up.
It's funny, isn't it? As we said earlier at the start, it was a tough game, it was a competitive game. Seville were a bit niggly off the ball, and there was a few instances where things could have escalated a bit. And it comes as no surprise that they had 8 red cards last season. I think they probably had the worst disciplinary record in Spain. You could see that, couldn't you? Because they really didn't take any prisoners. But again, a great test for us. And look, obviously at the last kick of the game, I think it was 4.5 minutes into 3 minutes of stoppage time, which again the ref played a blinder. Ruben Vargas scored an equaliser, I think. Again, with VAR, gets given for offside because the player who was offside kind of blocked Moore's view. But look, ultimately it's irrelevant in terms of scoreline. I think overall, as we kept saying, there were 2 very different lineups, played 2 different styles of play and 2 different approaches. But overall, I think, again, for our first proper pre-season game, I think there's an awful lot to take out on the positive side of the column.
Yeah, without doubt. Obviously, you like a win, but I don't think Regis Lebris and his coaching staff are going to be too bothered about the fact it finished a draw. Like you say, it probably shouldn't have even been allowed that goal anyway. It was clearly offside from what I could tell.
Yeah.
And I might regret saying this, but VAR, we might actually appreciate it in some instances next season. You can clip that up and play that back to me when we've been caught out by it. But But yeah, without doubt, there was lots of good things to take from that. It would appear as if the players are understanding their roles and trying to carry out their instructions. We looked dangerous. As we said earlier, the new lads look to be fitting in. That midfield, which in the Premier League really does matter. You need your midfield to be on top of their game in the Premier League. Our midfield looked pretty cohesive. Yes, yeah, always disappointing to concede at the end, Martin. But in the grand scheme of things, it was a worthwhile night, I would have said.
No, it was. And look, I'm not normally a massive fan of pre-season games. Sometimes I think they can just play out, and it is a glorified training exercise. But that was a proper game. I thought the intensity was right. I thought the level of competition was right. And again, hopefully that gets us up to speed and gets us back into the mindset of playing football and gets us prepared for the Premier League pretty well, because we've got a decent fixture list in pre-season, and I suspect the rest of the games will kind of play out at a sort of similar level. It's a very good standard in terms of the opposition that we've got. And of course, that continues on Monday, where we are back at the same stadium, I believe, on Monday, playing Sporting. And then we move on to Hearts on Saturday. So we've got a couple of games, again, coming in quick succession to keep our fitness levels up. There's a couple of players who didn't feature tonight, Chris Rigg and Nectar Triantis, who I don't know if they missed out because of any sort of niggle, or if they would just plan to not play and maybe play a full game on Monday. We'll see how that transpires. But, Triantis especially is somebody who I'm keen to see a bit of action from. And, with the troubles, with the lack of strength, I guess, that we've got at central defence, there could be an opportunity for him to establish himself, although he's played the vast majority of his football in the last 18 months in midfield. But he's somebody who I'd like to see get an opportunity. But we'll see what transpires on Monday. And, we've probably got another 2 or 3 new signings to come in if our activity over the past few weeks can go by. But yeah, so we've got that game on Monday. Hearts on Saturday. Chris spoke recently to Craig Gordon. Obviously, the Hearts game's a testimonial for him. Chris recently spoke to Craig Gordon about his career at Sunderland and the game. So if you haven't listened to that one, catch up on the podcast feeds for that. We will have new pods coming every day, as is now our norm. I think we're approaching 150 in, 3 months? So, it's a pretty good 3 or 4 months anyway. So it's a pretty good record to continue. So we'll keep those cranking out. But until then, Andrew, we will say thank you very much. I think it's been a good evening for Sunderland, and yeah, lots of potential for the new season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the whole point. We follow the club because we want to watch football, and yeah, Saturday night watching a decent game, lots of good things to come from it. So, not bad at all, and always nice again to catch up with you and chew the fat over Sunderland.
No, likewise. Excellent. Well, thank you to all of the listeners for joining us tonight, and we will be back tomorrow with something else for your ears. But until then, goodbye.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.